were involved in producing a book that's called Without Precedent, The Inside Story of the 9/11 Commission, where they used the phrase they felt that the commission was, quote, set up to fail, unquote, and write that the commission was so frustrated with repeated misstatements by officials from the Pentagon and from the Federal Aviation Administration during the investigation that it considered a separate investigation into possible obstruction of justice by Pentagon and FAA officials. This is the commission chair and vice chair, folks, in their own words. And I'll also point to John Farmer Jr., who was the senior counsel, legal counsel to the commission, who stated that the commission, quote, discovered that what government and military officials had told Congress, the commission, the media, and the public about who knew what when was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue, unquote. And actually, in a separate quote, Farmer continues, at some level of the government, at some point in time, there was a decision not to tell the truth about what happened. The NORAD tapes told a radically different story from what had been told to us and the public, unquote. And then Thomas Keene, the head, again, of the 9/11 Commission, also had the quote, we to this day don't know why NORAD told us what they told us. It was just so far from the truth, unquote. Now, Dr. Wood, these are different quotes taken from these folks involved in the 9/11 Commission, and I know that you were not a part of that 9/11 Commission, so I won't, I think, trouble to ask about your position on this, because instead, with your own work, you've had a wealth of forensic facts to operate from and to work from, and the facts being photographic evidence, visual or video evidence, et cetera. So what I'd like to do is turn our conversation back to what you had began with us a bit ago about some of these other anomalies that folks who are questioning these events really should be aware of or informed about.
As for the weird fires, folks see something orange glowing, and they assume it's hot. They see fumes coming from the ground. They call it smoke, and so they assume the cause is fire. That's why I call it fumes. And there's images where there's oxy-fuel torch hoses draped across the, quote, pile. You know, oxyacetylene torches sitting out there. If it's supposed to be 1,000 degrees out there, you wouldn't do that. It'd explode.
Yes.
So there's these hoses draped across there. There's people, you don't stand in the middle of your grill, you know, at that kind of temperature. So the temperatures, there's no evidence of real high temperatures. Matter of fact, the water main broke that day, and the area was flooded. So what is causing these fumes?
Excellent questions once again. And I do apologize, Dr. Wood. We're up to our first break on the hour. Folks, you're listening to the National Intel Report on Republic Broadcasting Network. Our guest, Dr. Judy Wood, will be back in just one moment.
Get ready for Real Talk Radio. You're listening to the National Intel Report with your host, John Stadtmiller.
Welcome back to the National Intel Report with your host, minus John Stadtmiller. Today is Antonin Feori, myself, sitting in proudly for John. Folks, we're visiting with Dr. Judy Wood, author of Where Did the Towers Go?, her website, drjudywood.com, and also wheredidthetowersgo.com. And we've got a couple of callers on the line. I do want to make sure we've got a chance to visit with our listening audience. So we're going to hold up just a bit to our discussion about some of these anomalies, the things that most of us should be made aware of. And at the moment, I think we've got Maggie on the line. Maggie, are you there?
Hey, hi, Dr. Wood. How you doing?
Hi, Maggie.
Listen, I've got a question. When you first saw the towers fall, were there things that you watched that kind of raised your suspicions at that time, or was it after you started to do some analysis? Because I know you've mentioned things that burn aren't always fire, or were there things in the way that they fell in there? Because I know a lot of the different videos that I watched, and I certainly am not a civil engineer and don't know any of the things that you know, but it just seemed kind of odd to me that both buildings would collapse in an identical fashion, and my background isn't anything related to yours at all. But when you saw the video of that or watched it live, perhaps, was there something that kind of just struck you out at the time with the knowledge base that you have that made you think, wait a second, something ain't right with this picture?
Yes, all of it. Just looking at it. But another thing about my professional training is I never put everything, never put all my marbles in one basket. So it isn't just the videos, isn't just the images, it's the whole thing. And you look at different angles of it, and like it just, no, that can't be the story. It cannot be the story. Because, another thing, if terrorists are going to take out these buildings, why aren't the buildings tipped over? If you tip them over, crash down the bathtub, you flood lower Manhattan, you really do some damage.
Yeah.
How do they not do that damage? I think the next day when I went into class, I was still shaking my head with my students saying, how could these things not have toppled over and not destroyed Manhattan? I was just asking. This is weird.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your research and looking into it. I'm actually on your website right now, so I really don't have any other questions. It's fascinating to me, and it's funny because I was just talking to somebody about this last night. We were talking about 9/11 and the stuff associated with that, so it's kind of interesting you happen to be on the show today, so I'll keep listening. Thanks a lot, Dr. Wood.
Well, Maggie, are you still on the line, Maggie? I'd just like to ask you, Maggie, I'm sure that you were, watching live as the events unfolded that day. Did you have some questions that were popping up? Did something, not quite seem right in the land of Denmark to you that day also?
Well, I just thought it was kind of odd that the buildings fell in an identical fashion. I thought that was kind of strange, but I don't have any, my background is healthcare. It's not anything related to engineering, so I don't have any structural engineering or those skill sets that the doctor has to be able to look at it from a really, a scientific perspective. I just thought it was, kind of odd. It's just, things don't collapse in an identical fashion, maybe dominoes.
Sure.
But what else does in life? I mean, how often could you replicate that without there being...
Yes, very good point. Very good question to ask, yes. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for your call. I sure appreciate you joining the program today, and I'm also thankful to hear that you're over on Dr. Wood's website already. I think you're going to find a tremendous amount of resource there.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Dr. Wood, did you have any thoughts there kind of in reaction to Maggie's last comments?
It's just wonderful that she had her eyes open and was looking through her eyes, too, not through her ears, about something isn't right here, and going with your feeling that, not saying, okay, I don't know anything, let the grown-ups tell us what to think.
Very, very well said. Very well said. And, folks, many of you who've listened to my past programs, you've heard me make expositions about things like the Tuskegee experiments, MK-Ultra, the fact that even Harry Truman himself wasn't aware at all of the Manhattan Project until after he'd taken the oath of office. An awful lot of time, when you look at our country and the condition that things are in at the moment, I think a lot of that could have been changed. We could be on a different trajectory right now with this, what used to be a republic, if only there were more folks that would ask those questions and not just assume that, in Dr. Woods' parlance, that the grown-ups will take care of it, quote unquote. We, and that means each and every one of us, we have to be that grown-up, and we have to be informed and educated so that we're ready and able to ask those questions and push back against those official versions of events. We have a couple other folks holding on the lines, waiting patiently. We have Jeff in Idaho. Jeff is an old friend from calling into a couple of my past programs. So, Jeff, I'll bring you into the show. Welcome to the show, and what's on your mind today, Jeff?
Hi, Anthony. Thank you very much. Hi, Dr. Wood.
Hello.
Hi. I've talked to you a couple times before on a couple of questions, but I wanted to bring in some of the free energy aspects of all these issues that are, that kind of add to some of the scientific things that you've studied. In the late 90s, a person wrote a book called...
Jeff, I need to interrupt just one moment because I need to let you know we've got an awful lot of content yet on the program to kind of pace ourselves out to, so... If you can hit it in either bullet point form or the form of a question for Dr. Wood, I sure appreciate it.
Right. It's real quick. In the 90s, a person published a book on how iron can have electron capture into the proton and make it a short-term radionuclide. And then I want to read from Dr. Constantine Morel's book. He's the expert on longitudinal waves that Tesla discovered 100 years ago. The book is Self-Consistent Electrodynamics. And
let me have you hold there for just a moment, Jeff. And I'd like to ask Dr. Wood, do you have familiarity with either resource that we've identified or talked about here? That Jeff's pointed to?
Yes, and we really don't need to go that far to understand where this energy comes from, because we've all seen or heard about tornadoes.
Right.
Think about, where does that energy come from?
Right, that's what I was leading into. Right.
Okay. Well,
Right.
Jeff, go ahead and hit that next bullet point if you would, but we do need to keep it short. We got some other folks on the line.
Morell's work is all based on vortex technology, and Dr. Woods has talked about the Hurricane Aaron being a Tesla coil, just like Dr. Feori has talked about the Great Pyramid being a Tesla coil. And the Earth discharges 1,000 volts of lightning every second to equalize the energy sent from the sun. And Dr. Morell speaks about how neutrino power is the source of most of all these issues with the vortex issues. But with the exploding cars, I wanted to just read a paragraph. These conversion losses appear as a result of the crystalline material structure, iron, cobalt, and nickel. On the other hand, almost all other materials don't show any of these hysteresis phenomenon, which is why these ferromagnetic form a rare and special exception. However, conductive materials like silver, copper, and aluminum heat up only by electrical currents and eddy currents. Essentially, these standing waves produced by the hurricane will affect materials differently from what Dr. Woods is talking about. And the one issue that you get into is, the dielectric constants and resonance. And so I just wanted to bring out that point for these weird, the toasted car issue and, the electrical fields that can be created by these things that Tesla discovered 100 years ago. If you produce huge electrical fields, you can essentially tap the neutrino power, and that's where you can get this huge amount of energy, and that's where you can basically do the material things like transmutation, like what Paul Leviat talks about in his subquantum.
Excellent. Say, Jeff, I need to jump in here. I appreciate the thoughts. I think, Jeff, the direction you're heading is ready for our 300 level show, if not our 400 level show, maybe down the road. But appreciate the call, Jeff. Need to let you go because we got some other folks on the line. And it's not that I disagree. It's fascinating conversation, but we're getting a little farther down the road in terms of technical implications than where my hope was to be today, which is to stick to a lot of these points of the forensic evidence that's right before us. Dr. Wood, Jeff has called into my program before, and he's very astute at providing a whole can of worms all in one short span. So I'd ask for some of your reaction to maybe either a couple of the sources that he pointed to and or related concepts from your own research.
I think you said it well. It's like a 300 or 400 level course where we're trying to get people to understand the most basic things.
Yes.
And without scaring them into thinking that this is really difficult.
Right.
Because it's something that anyone can understand and comprehend if they don't panic about it, if they're not taught that it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think the key important thing here is to realize that still far too many Americans, I think, have just idly accepted, once again, that official version of the events when there are so many of these elements. How did Building 7 and the other buildings go down when nothing happened to them? How is it that the towers themselves went down at faster than free fall speed, and they didn't pancake their way down at that? They just seemed to go poof. Those are some of the basic questions that we need to get more Americans attuned to. And Jeff, again, I do appreciate your call, but that comes another stage down the road. Once we get another 20-30% of Americans awakened, then we can tackle some of those issues perhaps. So let's see. We do have one other person on the line at the moment. That's John in New York City. John, are you on the line?
Hey, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, John.
I have to let you know we've got just a short segment here, but I do want to welcome you to the National Intel Report. And what's on your mind, John?
I just have one quick comment about 9/11. I remember I was 11 years old, and I was in class, and then when the planes crashed, we were all in class, and then my teacher, she came to the class, and in this very condescending tone, she just gathered the class and said, "Hey, do any of you guys know what a terrorist attack is?" And the whole class was silent. I was the only student that raised my hand willingly, and then she picked on me, and she said, "Yes, John." And I said, "Oh, a terrorist attack is like bombing or something." I don't remember exactly what I said. And I don't know. I just remember that day like it was yesterday. And then I went home. I got picked up from school early. My father picked me up.
Well, John, I apologize. We do have to take a quick commercial break. Why don't you stay on the line with me? We'll come back after the break. And if you've got a question for Dr. Wood,